group that is made up of different international NGOs, consultants to the sector, and even some private for-profit companies that are part of it and delivering services to the sector that they give us feedback on what are the gaps in training, where do people need to build their skills, right? And so that's a lot of how we decide what content to build or curate. We look at topics with the greatest need that can really have the largest impact. And we constantly review our catalog. We listen to our users through surveys, experts like with our advisory group. And then we have hundreds of partners. So in the for-profit sector and the humanitarian sector. So once we identify gaps, then we co-develop with humanitarian organizations and agencies in the sector who they contribute content because they're the experts, right? They contribute content and subject matter expertise. And then we bring to the table our expertise on instructional design development. We bring our platform to the table that is disaster ready. It operates off of the learning management system that the Cornerstone OnDemand company creates. And then we focus on promotion and getting people engaged with the content. Now, the NGO, the private and the public sector also help address content gaps because they can donate content that we host in Disaster Ready. They donate it for free. We make it available at no cost on our platform to the learner. And then there are some organizations that provide funds that help sponsor either the development of a course or maybe repurposing a course from one modality to the other. And then a biggie is translating content. Yeah. So where there's great content out there, it's not always available in the languages that need it the most.
Yeah, so, that's really, really interesting in terms of the challenges for localization and ideally sourcing content from the point of need gives you the best localized content, right?
Exactly. And there was just one other point that I wanted to make here that you asked is in terms of collaboration, we really, really try to make sure and avoid duplication. And this is a challenge because, of course, in the aid sector in the last decade, it's really matured more and more around dedicating time and resources to building content. And therefore, we don't want to duplicate, and that's important. There's just so little funding for it. The other thing that you asked was, what are the most popular subjects? So because we have a large group of learners that are new to the sector, they're trying to break in, or they're in the early years of their career, humanitarian essentials. What are the basics that I need to know about the context, the ecosystem, how it all works? The other popular topics are like needs assessment. Whenever a disaster, whether it's man-made or natural, occurs, you have to assess the need, right? And then another popular topic is monitoring and evaluation and safety and security. So in whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're doing the right things the right way and that you're doing them safely.
Got it. Are there any sort of boundaries to what you do? Are there areas where you say this is not for you to focus on?
Well, we really focus on online learning. So, it's we don't typically get involved with instructor-led training. So that would be one area. We work with partners and organizations to really look at what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's internal for their staff or external with their partners, and think about whether a blended model makes sense. And so we can definitely be a part of a blended model solution, but we typically don't do a 100% face-to-face training solution.
Got it. Now, this might sound like a really obvious question, but sometimes, they're the hardest. Why help us understand why this sector in particular needs to have access to free learning resources? Don't Red Cross International, Save the Children train their own people and volunteers?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So the answer is that we see every day how the private sector has the resources to pay and defray the costs of staff development. even though the humanitarian sector has made progress, so to your point, yes, ICRC, Save the Children, large INGOs, UN agencies today do have staff development departments, right? Mm-hmm. And they designate funding to it. There are thousands, there's so many more small to medium-sized NGOs, aid organizations, development organizations, and nonprofits in general that have much less to spend. And even the reality of them all is that when you're doing aid and nonprofit work, the bulk of the funding goes towards programs that help the affected populations.
Yes.
And there within is a challenge, right? So part of what the sector is trying to change and evolve to is having donors, whether it's government donors or private donors, see the value in funding staff development, because typically it's not part of it. And so it leaves it to the organization to have to bring those resources to bear. And that makes it even harder. So,
yeah, it's sort of a fundamental flaw in the sort of charitable mindset mm-hmm. model, isn't it? That everybody wants to build a school, nobody wants to buy the cleaning supplies for the school.
Exactly, right.
And so that all this money comes with a lot of constraints, and often training gets ignored. So. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of energy and money we're sort of uncovering gets spent, but just not in a very systematic and clever way. So it's great that you're sort of essentially pooling resources to make this content available very, very broadly. I like it very much.
Exactly. And it's a part of our existence. It's one of the reasons why our foundation was created, because we don't want cost to be a factor. We don't want anybody to have to choose between program resources and capacity development, because that puts them and their organization at risk. I mean, if you force people to choose, you do a disservice to the organization and their mission. So
can you just quickly touch on, you talked about this a little bit, but the pedagogical model you use, synchronous, asynchronous, you said you don't get involved in face-to-face training. What is your training, what's the experience of your training feel like for people, and how do you think about it for the future?
Certainly. So we teach and employ rapid instructional design models in most of our projects. And so we do some projects, we're a very small team. So we do some projects in-house. We also partner with organizations to outsource the actual development of the content, and then we project manage that and do the testing and those sorts of things. But while we believe that blending live or synchronous learning with asynchronous learning is a beneficial model, we also are really aware of the difficulties that nonprofits and humanitarians have in being able to attend live training. And again, if you're thinking about just the maturity of online learning in this particular sector, it's lagging behind, right? And then it even lags behind the for-profit world. Mm-hmm. And then it even lags more behind if you're looking at developing countries. But having said that, it just means that we still have room to build in the value for online learning and for people to take that where they can learn in an effective way. So things that I mean by that is, you don't have to go to a conference. There's still many people that think the only good training is at a conference, or you don't have to be in live training. You can actually attend self-paced training when and where you need it, and be able to learn both theory and be able to practice. So when I think about the future of where we're going, more and more we recognize that online simulation, interactive simulation is going to become important, so that people can have more of a depth of learning and practice those principles and theories without actually having to do so for the first time in a disaster context, right? And especially whenever you're in a crisis zone that's not safe. The other things that we're seeing for the future are the use of learning pathways and certifications for people to deepen their skills. And we're already starting to do some work around that. We've been partnering with a design development company called Sweet Rush, who is one of the leading organizations out there right now, who's doing some great innovative work in online simulation. And we've partnered together with them and Mercy Corps to create an online course that has a 20-minute module for theory and principles of creating and implementing voucher programs, coupled with a 25-minute online simulation. And it provides learners that opportunity to learn in a safe environment, to fail. It has a health meter that tells them what the health of their program looks like based on the decisions that they're making. And it incorporates all of the aspects of needs assessment, monitoring and evaluation, things that are necessary to implement a program correctly and to really make an effective impact.
Sounds really interesting. What's the name of the program?
The program, you can find it on disasterready.org, and it's called Creating and Implementing Vouchers.
Excellent. And I've actually seen a lot of VR usage as well. I know that's still a sort of relatively expensive technology, but in terms of creating empathy with populations that you might not be familiar with, or preparing people for stressful situations, that's an interesting technology too.
It is very interesting, and it's making strides, and I believe that in the future we'll see more of that. The cost just needs to come down for it to be affordable, and then the bandwidth needs to be such that individuals, in areas of the world where internet isn't strong, can utilize it. But it is fascinating.
That's a great segue into a bit of a discussion about the advantages and drawbacks of digital. Obviously, what I'm picking up from you is scale and speed is really important in the context that you operate in. Are there any drawbacks to sort of digital? I think there's still a lot of people don't really understand how quickly broadband and particularly cell phone access is growing in the global south. But what are your thoughts on the pros and cons of a digital approach?
Yeah, I mean, some of the additional approaches would be accessibility. So being able to increase the reach by making training more accessible to people in very, very remote parts of the world, or that have, poor internet, and the ability to practice in a safe environment. So we talked a little bit about an example there. Performance support. I also think that online learning is a great means of performance support. So, you attend a training, it can be outstanding and you can learn a lot, but then you're going to sleep between then and the future, or you're going to hit some really stressful, difficult situation that just makes it hard to recall, what am I supposed to do? And so you're right, we're seeing more and more that people are using smartphones in their work, particularly in humanitarian aid, to do all kinds of things. But certainly we're creating more and more content with our partners, co-developing it to enable humanitarian aid workers to access learning on their smartphone. And it's a great performance support. I mean, we just issued a couple of months back Ready to Go mobile guides, which are interactive guides that are like getting 10 minutes with an expert. But you can do that before you deploy, or in the middle of a situation that maybe you're not familiar with and you just need the cliff notes.
Interesting.
In terms of drawbacks, we've already talked about the areas of the world that have poor internet. But the other two that I would name are not all online learning is created equal. So you can have poorly designed e-learning. That's certainly a drawback. And then the cost to create versions of online training in other languages.
Yes.
It can also be expensive but necessary.
Do you work with people in the global south who build content for you? I know there's a lot of app factories emerging in Africa, for example, where there's, they're building skills to do digital work. Do you source content from the global south?
We do, yeah. We really source content truly from all over,
yeah,
all over the world. And